Hi guys, I'm Clarissa, and I'm going to share my investigation on the topic of using behavioral studies to test abstract and concrete language for embodied semantics theory. So the first question is, what is embodied semantics? It's actually about two opposite philosophical views called classical cognitive view and embodied view. Classical cognitive view believes that human brain is like a computation that is purely based on logical rules, making distinctions between mental and physical parts, like emotion and language should not be interfering with action and emotion, while embodied theory emphasizes cognitive process involve various aspects of an organism, including sensory and motor system. Well, embodied semantics is just putting embodied view into a language context, that is, whether comprehending the meaning of words will activate a motor system or not. In part 1, I'll discuss Glenberg's article published in 2008 about processing abstract language modulates motor system activity. The aim of the study is to verify that motor system modulates our comprehension of abstract and concrete languages. I divided the study into 4 parts: linguistic material, action movement, behavioral experiment, and neurophysiological experiment. Before diving into the details, I want to first introduce the main concept of the study, ACE, also known as action-sentence compatibility effect. Because Glenberg doesn't want to make some random sentences with unrelated actions that participants are required to do, he created a connection by using direction of towards or away. Sentences have the meaning of away or towards, as the participants are required to press farther key, that is away, or nearer key, that is towards. In linguistic part, there are 3 aspects. Whether the sentence is abstract or concrete, concrete often refers to a tangible object and abstract refers to concepts or information. The second aspect is direction mentioned in ACE. No transfer sentences serve as a control group with no compatibility. And the third dimension is whether the sentence is sensible or not. Participants are asked to press the key only when the sentence is sensible. The new dimension is added to ensure participants' movement intention is unrelated to the experiment intention, which prevents bias. And for action movement, there are 2 ways: reaction time, in which shorter reaction time is expected to indicate compatibility, and TMS that indicates MEP of OP muscle on hand to see whether the motor system is activated, which will be further explained. So experiment 1 is a behavioral experiment that found reaction time for compatible actions and sentences is significantly shorter than that of incompatible actions and sentences. However, the existence of ACE doesn't guarantee the function of motor system is to modulate comprehension, but also may occur after the comprehension for action preparation. Therefore, experiment 2 is carried out, using TMS to see MEP occur right after the verb is read out loud, excluding the possibility of action preparation. The result of the experiment not only indicate ACE, but also the difference between abstract and concrete sentences. That is, concrete sentences have smaller ACE than abstract sentences, and concrete sentences receive more misjudgment than abstract sentences. Glenberg also attributes ACE with the mirror neuron system, which has recently found to be crucial in understanding surrounding world by observation. It may also have an important role in understanding language about actions. So in part 2, Buccino 2005 and Greco 2021 will be discussed, since they are both related to behavioral studies and embodied semantics. Buccino did research on the topic of listening to action-related sentences modulates the activity of motor system, a combined TMS and behavioral study. So we can see in the first place that the methods used in this study is extremely similar to the one in Glenberg. In fact, the reason why this article is chosen is mainly because even though they use very similar methods, they've gained seemingly opposite results, which will be further discussed. The same as in Glenberg's study, I divided Buccino's article into 3 parts: linguistic material, action movement, and the result. Instead of using sentences with directional and transfer meanings, Buccino designed sentences that include hand action and foot action in third-person perspectives to assess whether listening to concrete and action-related sentences requires motor system modulation, specifically hand and feet action meanings. It's interesting to notice that abstract sentence is also involved in this experiment, but serve as a control group. In other words, Buccino assumes that abstract sentence will fail to activate motor system, which is further proven to be wrong by Glenberg 3 years later. For action movement, correspondingly, since the experiment investigated on the effect of comprehending foot and hand action, it first uses TMS to measure MEP amplitude of the 2 muscles mainly. It was found that MEP amplitude of certain muscles has decreased significantly when actions related to the muscle are described in the sentence. For example, OP muscle response, which is about hand, is lower when participants are listening to hand action sentences, and TA muscle response, which is on the feet, is lower when they are listening to foot action sentences. Because experiment Experiment 1 only measured MEP passively, and it's not guaranteed whether participants comprehend a sentence or not. In Experiment 2, Basino requires participants to press knobs to indicate response when the sentence is concrete by using hand or feet, depending on different groups the participants belong to. The results in Experiment 2 are coherent with the findings of Experiment 1, meaning motor system is involved in action-related concrete language comprehension and will slow down other muscle-related activities when cognitive processing. The result is opposite from the results when visually observed action is seen by participants, which will lead to increase in MEP. Basino proposes two possibilities. The first one is reciprocal inhibition, meaning understanding the sentence and pressing the knob are two separate intentions, which will inhibit each other. And another explanation is that compared to direct observation, which is lively and in detail, verb description only offers a very general impression without context and is understood as an integrated part instead of step-by-step in progress. Therefore, words are understood in the higher order, which poses inhibitory effect on a specific motor response like pressing in the study. Also, according to Glamberg, the third-person perspective used in the experiment may also fail to engage the participants and lead to different results. The second article chosen is Greco 2021, Spatial and Motor Aspects in the Action-Sentence Compatibility Effect. This relatively new published study poses problem on previously done embodied semantic studies, specifically ACE. Some weakness mentions include unanalyzed control group, which result in the loss of potential research direction, uncontrolled sentence length and word difficulty, which counted as uncontrolled variable that leads to inaccuracy, ambiguous explanation that doesn't differentiate between perceptual and motor in statistical analysis, and not differentiating motor and spatial aspects in ACE, and finally, the incomplete statistical methods. The main problem Greco attempts to solve is separating motor and spatial aspects by proving spatial aspects prevails motor aspect in ACE. So 6 experiments are designed correspondingly, and the aim of experiment 1 was to duplicate Glamberg's study in 2008, generating sensible and insensible sentences with towards, away, and no transfer meanings and making the participant judge the sensibility of the sentence and the reaction time is recorded and analyzed to see the compatibility linkage, like what we just talked before. But the only difference, or the only change, is that the participants are making the judgment by moving the mouse up, which means away, and down, which means towards, to select the sensibility options on the vertical screen instead of pressing the far or near key. It's designed to reduce the motor component by placing the mouse far enough to force the participants to rest their forearms on the table, separating the spatial and motor aspects from the general ACE. After discovering no significant difference between compatible and incompatible groups, Greco attributed it to the uncontrolled variables. So in Experiment 2, Greco not only narrowed down the outliers, but also adjusted different sentence length and word ambiguity to a more stable level via statistical methods. Meanwhile, it also changed a rather uncommon expression of to you into you, a more commonly used phrase in Italian. The results gained, however, still indicates no significant difference as in Experiment 1. And considering the settings and the results difference between Glamberg's study and this study, Greco attributed two failures to found ACE in the weak linkage between moving the mouse up and down on the screen and away and towards directions. Therefore, Experiment 3, 4, and 5 are dedicated to creating the connection by changing the background to increase the sense of depth, which is shown in the PowerPoint, adding a warm-up exercise to form automatization, and placing the monitor from vertically to horizontally on the table for a more direct orientation sense, respectively. Despite the warm-up exercise, in which participants interact with a person throwing a ball from the downside of the screen to the upside of it, all other improvements continue to apply in later experiments. Nevertheless, after all these attempts, ACE has still not been found. In Experiment 6, Greco further increases the sense of engagement of participants by referring to the participants in instructions and explicitly asking the participants to react quicker, but the results are the same. Even though spatial prevalence isn't found, the results suggesting other findings that reaction time is longer for no-transfer sentences. RT for no-transfer nonsense sentences is shorter for sensible no-transfer sentences since Experiment 3, and block is the main effect that causes difference, which leads to the discussion of practice effect in Part 3. Finally, in Part 3, I'll discuss the theme and logic shared between 3 articles, the limitation of individual studies and the general field, as well as the extended experiment direction. In 3 articles selected, not only does they all focus on embodied semantics and behavioral methods, but also the linkage between actions required for participants and the sentence meaning gradually increases. From unrelated action and semantics in Buccino to direction compatibility in Glambert, and Greco even subdivided compatibility into spatial and motor aspects separately. The progressively specific investigation direction in cognitive science is also the main logic throughout this paper. However, few research has been able to draw any systematic analysis of control group, which can be specified to abstract sentence in Buccino's study and no transfer sentence in Glambert's study, which has proven to be inspirational by later research. For example, I have mentioned that the assumptions made about abstract sentence in Buccino's study has been proven wrong by Glambert later. If Buccino analyzes the MEPs of participants when hearing abstract sentence semantics, he'll discover hand muscle MEPs of abstract sentence are smaller than listening to foot action sentences with no overlapping error bar, implying abstract sentences can arise some extent of motor modulation, though smaller than the effect of sentences with concrete hand action meanings. Similarly, no transfer sentences in Glambert could also be compared with the incompatible reaction time, indicating even oppositely incompatible match still have motor effects much stronger than no transfer sentences. For weaknesses found in specific studies, Glambert fails to acknowledge the significance of practice effect. By looking at the figure, we can see that Glambert only proved the compatibility between yes near action and toward direction, but cannot prove the compatibility between yes far action and away direction because the reaction time for away and toward sentence meaning in yes far action is the same. It may be because yes far take place right after the participant has finished yes near experiments and participants has become more familiar with the experiment and therefore have less reaction time. Excluding the practice effect may make the result more valid. As shown in the new figure, the pink line I draw indicate the one possible result when excluding practice effect. No transfer in yes far condition will have greater reaction time, same as away and toward in yes far condition. Practice effects may mask the compatibility effect before. Also, the Greco study have attempted to reduce the motor effect. Moving the mouse still requires the wrist and the finger muscle movement, so the results could still be accurate to represent the spatial aspect solely. And for the future experiment direction, I'm intrigued by the Buccino's graph, which indicates that abstract sentence includes more hand muscle modulation than feet muscles. A question has arisen therefore. The comprehension of abstract language is more related to which body part, hands or feet, and whether switching from the third-person perspective to first-person perspective will reverse the results by engaging participants, just as what Glambert suggests. The experiment is correspondingly designed with the hypothesis suggesting based on Buccino's work. It may explain as when children are learning abstract concepts such as love and justice, adults usually use hand gestures instead of foot movements to give instructions. Even if the children have grown up, the childhood observation link with the comprehension still remains. During the experiment, Buccino's abstract sentences, together with an equal number of concrete sentences that serve as a control group, are gathered, generated, and changed from third-person perspective into first-person perspectives to increase the engagement for participants. And participants are therefore divided into groups to judge whether the sentence is abstract or concrete. If participants consider the sentence as abstract while reading it out loud within a restricted time, they'll press a button. Whether using a hand or foot to press the button depends on the group they belong to in order to exclude the practice effect. Expected results are that hand response is faster than feet response when abstract sentences are comprehended because hand muscle is more activated when comprehending abstract sentence than feet muscle. The expected result is different from Buccino's finding because of the change of sentence perspectives from third to first person perspectives, also explained by Glambert in 2008 article. ACE is not utilized in this experiment because the sentences don't necessarily have transfer meaning and therefore hard to construct compatibility between semantics and actions. Due to the change in Buccino's experiment and verification of Glambert's explanation, the experiment should first determine whether there is significant difference between hand action and feet action when comprehending abstract sentences, then to see whether the change of sentence perspective will cause reaction time to switch from longer than the control group to shorter than the control group. Results of the experiment can help differentiate motor responses when comprehending concrete and abstract sentences, assisting cognitive scientists to investigate the boundaries of concrete and abstract sentence. For example, is idiomatic language whose words describe concrete motor movement but have abstract meanings comprehended as abstract or concrete sentences by ourselves? And that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoy and thank you for listening.